Welcome to the Writing with AI podcast, part of the Writing with AI subreddit. In every episode, my co-moderator, Yoav, Yariv, and I talk to people who are pushing the boundaries of writing, filmmaking, and AI. In this episode, we have the first of two discussions with Minh and Fred Grinstein, who are the founders of Machine Cinema. And as a friend of ours called them, they are a force of nature. Here's why they matter to you right now. This is a global group of AI filmmakers and creators who are dedicated to expanding the craft of AI filmmaking. They host regular meetings online and terrific in real life meetings they call GenJams, where people from complete newbies to AI filmmaking pros get together to use the new tools of AI filmmaking and actually create short films within a few hours. In this episode, we're going to talk about the future of AI and writing, a very long-winded introduction. but welcome Minh and Fred to the Writing with AI subreddit.
Hello. I'll basically do whatever Fred Graver tells me to do. It's sort of my short answer of my happy
policy.
That will bring about the destruction of machine cinema in no time. So tell us a little bit. I want to get right to, just because I know how useful this is going to be, and I want to dive right into writing and using the tools of Gen AI. But first, as people listen to this, they are going to want to somehow be connected or involved with machine cinema. How can they do that?
Well, I would say that they can follow our socials. We're at Machine Cinema on Instagram, at Machine Cinema AI on Twitter/X. We also have a Substack that is text.machinecinema.ai, where we have a weekly newsletter. And then Fred hosts a Gen Talks every Wednesday, where we have two people come in from the industry, including you, Fred, if you've come on, as well as we do a Robo Dojo, which Fred Graver were the guest of. It was a Fred and Fred show, in which
I'm already seeing the problems with too many friends. We for everybody's sake,
I'm going to change my name.
FG1. You're Fred Graver. You're Fred 1. I'm Fred 2.
FG1
forever. But sorry, I'm getting confused. There's too many friends here, man.
Yeah.
You guys are terrific. Yes. So I would say the Substack is incredibly great. It comes out. It's basically a weekly newsletter, which is terrific, and the weekly conversations are really useful.
Yeah, I mean, look, our identity has mostly been an in-person event community, and that's how we started. And I think just
so let's talk about that. Tell us about how you tell us about GenJams and what they are and how they've kind of, you've been the Johnny Appleseed.
Men more than me, for sure. Video. I mean, we started off as a group of curious, sort of tech and media focused allies, friends, creators, all in LA here. And in interesting times is during the writer and actor strikes. There's a few different tectonic forces in motion that we're still outside of of AI feeling the ripples of. But that sort of created this ripe space that a lot of people were just, call them early adopters, early curious people. We're just getting together in person to discover together, laptops open. And that's what sort of sparked this wave of in-person meetups. And some people think of them hackathons. We call them GenJams. One of our very close friends, Suki, is hosted it in her living room, the first one. And we immediately saw our own interest to just keep doing this, keep getting together, but keep inviting people to. And I think always been this two-way learning street that we learn from constantly playing with the tools. But that's turned into this much more formatted, even evolving format of doing these events all over the world. And I'd say I've been holed up here in LA more than Minh. Minh's can speak to the journeys he's been taking globally. But how do we work with universities? How do we work with studios here in Los Angeles? How do we work with production companies? How do we work with this whole range of curious legacy people, young creators coming up at a time where these abundant tools are flooding them, sometimes people that are just doing this all by themselves at home and didn't realize this was a community activity. And a lot of different types of archetypes come to this thing, and there's all ages, but it's been an amazing way to keep growing, frankly, selfishly our own curiosity, but it's become this community that again has been born in person. But as to answer your question, we have what started as a WhatsApp group, what's growing into a Discord community. We have our Substack newsletters. We have our live calls that you've participated in too. So it's become this super organic, like responding to the motion of the space, I think. But Minh, I don't know if you want to describe what you've been doing globally. I mean, that's been this year of expansion for us.
Yeah, I think in some ways we call 2024 our season 1 Machine Cinema. We did maybe about 15 or a dozen GenJams, mostly in California. And then 2025, we just kind of we just hit the ground running, and it was like Sundance, TIFF. We flew to Korea. We did something in Tokyo. So it just was 2025 was in 1 year, we did like over 100 GenJams, which is a crazy feat in and of itself all around the world. Literally just did one yesterday in San Francisco. Fred did one the day before in Los Angeles. And we had people, I now call it kind of an education network, right? Where we're training people to run their own GenJams. We also work, so we literally had folks doing it in Nigeria, in Madrid, in India, all within the last month and a half. And in addition to that, I would say we've kind of gone up market or upstream a little bit, where we've been doing these with agencies, with studios, with brands. Like, how do we architect an event that is, one part workshop, one part screening, one part hackathon, to get people to create something on the spot. And it's kind of an upskilling thing. It's kind of an HR type thing for some people. Sometimes it's fun for them. Sometimes it's just, hey, I'm just here to watch what people can do in a short time. It's like a knit. Sometimes I kind of joke it's like a knitting group. You go together, you learn some AI tools, and then you get to watch something together. It's a creative experience that you get to have with like a community. In addition to that, we're working on things where, hey, we do this with the TV Academy, the Film Academy. We are actually, with PGA, and how do we function as an advocacy group for AI, and more in the sense of hands-on learning, right? Where plenty of people can sit around and talk theoretically about what is AI, how is it impacting our universe, etc. And as a result can get locked in my opinion, to certain perspectives of what AI is, especially at a time when AI is something that has just been defined in some ways for people like a year or two ago. So we're like, hey, look, you should play with it, and then we can talk about how this entity or this technology or these tool sets can be applied in your workflows. How should we now react, now that you understand what it feels like to be creative with these tools?
Yeah, and just to be clear for people who aren't familiar, and my first experience with a GenJam was kind of mind-blowing. There were a bunch of people in a room. We broke off into teams of 3, 4, sometimes 5 people in the group. There was, myself. I'm a writer. I didn't have familiarity with any of these tools. There were people who were very familiar with image generation tools like Midjourney and Runway, then familiar with tools like Kling or other things that extended those into videos. Then there was somebody who was very, very good at editing them all together. He was using Premiere, but you could use CapCut, or you could whatever. So you get these small group of people. You guys tend to say, here's a theme, or here's a question, or here's something. 2 hours later, there's a film festival. And everybody's watching the work that they just made. And to both of your points, it's mind-blowing to go, oh, I get this now. Not only that these tools make things so simple, but also that it relies so much on your own creative input. When you watch 8 groups of people have 8 very different films around the same theme, you realize that this is empowering. It's not about AI slop or AI replacing things. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands it.
First of all, it's super interesting to hear about a community that is related to AI generation that was not created online. I think it's pretty unique. And one of the things that's interesting me as someone who helped building a community online is hearing your perspective, actually talking with the naysayers, or people who has issues with AI. Because online, I don't know if you know discussions online, but they usually get derailed pretty quickly. And this is how, like, I never had the chance to really talk with someone and have a meaningful debate from the other side. So I would love to hear your experiences with like people on the other side. What do they think? What do they feel? And what do you say to them if they're, I don't know, completely haters?
I mean, I think Min actually has experienced that online culture more than me. He's a bit more of a X user than I am, and can probably share some anecdotes. But I mean, I think that's been a few of the virtues of the in-person dynamic, which is that it forces us to be that much more human, which might even be a broader commentary of how much social media has overtaken the natural interactions between people. And I think that's forced us to be more listeners as people that are obviously enthusiastically exploring. I also teach at a university, so I have the privilege of interacting with young film students that are on a very specific journey. They see it as, part of this education that they and their parents have paid for. So there's a different set of expectations there. So I think it forces us as people in the space to listen more, and I think to have more to say to that conversation. I also think, it's one of the main slides in our presentation deck when we do our GenJams that Min's been always kind of tweaking. How do we continue to evolve the conversation that we're sparking by being here? Is that we're not here to deny any disagreement. We're not even here to sort of ignore it. I think, in fact, there's a general feeling that even if you're here to have problems with us, you're probably going to be better off still getting closer to the tools. You know what you're talking about on some level. But in general, I think, I think personally, I have 2 kids. I have other issues with different types of technology in our worlds. Like, I just feel minimally, it's my responsibility to understand this stuff as someone who's raising 2 people. But I think this is part of what happens when we ship technology into the world. We all need to be a part of shaping it. So I actually think, some people that have just decided to be in a binary of love and hate are missing the opportunity just to be inside the space that we're all here to sort of influence where it should go, where it can go, or where it needs to hear more about where it's problematic, or where is it showing signs of promise that more energy should go towards. We're doing an event next week. It's focusing on nonprofits, and we're very literally saying how do groups of people that never have a lot of money to sort of tell their stories. Is this an opportunity for them? We're about to find out. Maybe there's a discovery there too. But Min, I know that you're very close to that dialogue too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's online. It's been interesting because it's just easier for people to lob negativity at you online without repercussions. So, I tweet and I get people every other day who just are like, giving me death threats and things like that, just because I'm an AI creator or I support AI creation, which is, to me, I kind of like, it's fine because this is just the internet. But I also try to engage sometimes, and it's also very interesting because I do think it's worth talking about ethics and the environment and the power of big tech, right? And, the degree to which Hollywood is, losing something in its essence, or losing jobs or whatever. And all these issues, I think, are very real. I think it's worth engaging them on. At the same time, I can't help but feel, hey, like, why can't we engage on these conversations in a way that is like, okay, let's talk together. Let's sit together and think about how this actually is going to change things. You can't put AI away now, right? I'm not going to go out and say it's inevitable, but we can't now put it back inside of the bottle and say, hey, we're not going to use it. It's just not rational. I think that we have to now confront it together, even if you don't like it or you're anti it or people shouldn't use it. At least we should sit down and engage in a way that's healthy about what this means for us and how do we approach it as creatives. In person, it's been interesting because I've actually gone to an event in which a writer literally told me that what I'm doing is evil and that I'm evil because they feel that this is killing creativity, this is going to kill humanity, that they are like maybe even doomers. And to that, I'm like, hey, I write my P doom is 10. So I get that. I think that maybe there's a ever so slight chance that, humanity could end because of AI. But I think that's true of almost any technology or anything that's currently happening in politics or in whatever. So there's that. And then on the other side, I try to find the optimism. Like I literally am looking for philosophies or perspectives that help me to orient around what is the optimistic way. I think there's that famous phrase like, trust in Allah, but tie up your camel. Like I'm trying to tie up my camel, and the camel for me is, I am looking at, hey, what is an optimistic theory about how this could go well? Maybe it could go well that things get cheaper. We're going to go through a tough period of reorganizing how entertainment media works, but we're also going to result in potentially a world where we all can create our own creative projects. Many people don't get to. So can we all finally do the creative projects that we want? And we get the distribution. Somehow on this path, we figure out distribution and we get paid more for something that costs us less to do. Is that a world that, does Blair Witch project scale? That these kind of perspectives I'm always kind of looking for.
You both have brought up something interesting, and I think Yoav and I both share your optimism. What's interesting to me, and for people who are listening to the podcast who are writers, hold on a minute. I'm going to get to writers and filmmakers working together. What I keep finding as I work with people, when you introduce AI, and it's probably true of any new technology, into a organization, and let's use something as simple as a collaboration between a writer and a director, right? Once you introduce some kind of new technology in there, and what comes to mind right away is the video village on a set, right? Up until then, you had to trust that the camera was doing what the director had told it to. And now suddenly the people over to the side of the set are seeing what's in the camera with the director, right? So all of a sudden it's like, do we want to let these people in here? When you introduce AI into a collaboration, you have to not only think about the technology, but you begin rethinking the relationship between the people in the organization, right? So for example, if a production company is using AI to help review pitches or treatments or scripts, you have to rethink the jobs of the development people. You have to rethink how is AI trained for your goals, all of that. That larger, the thing where writers kind of say you're evil, to me, has its roots in their fear about the entire structure of filmmaking, even before AI. Right? I've constantly worried as a writer that I didn't really matter. All the good jokes about Hollywood involve some starlet choosing to sleep with the writer. That powerlessness is now manifest in the AI debate. That said, I want to talk about the necessity or the benefits of writers. People, particularly like a lot of the people we have in our group, are novelists. They're writing long form prose. Some of them are screenwriters. What is the benefit of beginning to visualize your work through image generation or even simple video generation for a writer as they're working, or maybe after they've finished a draft or something?
I mean, personally, I think everybody should answer that for themselves. I think the main opportunity is that it's there. It's available to you. I think the paradigms of these things are numerous. If you want to go back to Plato, and I hope I'm not misquoting Plato, but as I understand it, he's well quoted saying that books were problematic to him because
Aristotle hated writing.
Yeah,
Aristotle thought writing was going to destroy memory.
So I'm saying these sort of turning points where, in this case, the technology of writing had its moment of doubt among somebody that preferred or had a lot of opinions about the way things worked when you had to memorize everything, and maybe that was a higher form of brain power when your job is to remember everything. So I say that to at least zoom all the way out. That I think there's certainly enough examples that as new instruments were introduced to the process of documenting an idea, most people often found a lot of upside on that. And I'd say it's possible that there are writers that they're like, look, my job is to live in my imagination. It's somebody else's job to bring it to life. Perhaps they find a lot of comfort in that. I just also can think of lots of other sort of shifts in technology that once you've been given access to the opportunity to think differently and work out. Usually there's a lot more to discover there. And I try to treat most of this as a conversation of discovery. I think it would be probably a lot easier for everybody on all sides of these conversations to reach a point that we've concluded what is the AI. What is it? But we're actually at a moment of it's still arriving. There's a lot of new things that it keeps doing every week as these trillions of dollars are pumping around to decide what its impact is. So to that point, it isn't clear, is it just Photoshop? Does it just do that level of new things that, or the printing press or these various other moments? It's something that you have to start interacting with. And to try to come back to your question, Fred, I sort of invite a writer to notice, wait a second, I can start looking at my ideas. And maybe even 9 months ago, they would have looked at the quality of the image and video generation, even dismissed it. There's the Will Smith spaghetti kind of metaphor that these things aren't useful. Actually, they're pretty useful now. There's a lot of really good ones that you could even start deciding in a safe space what your image data set wants to look like as you try out what that actor might say or do before you hire them on set. So and that starts to continue to open up of how do you even apply it. But the act of being a writer and to live with your ideas and to test them out and to interact with them and maybe even stare at them as you write to them, I'm just inviting people to know that it's there. And if they don't want it, then stick to whatever works for you. But that's the big moment here. I think writers are above and beyond the most empowered, superpowered members of this journey, because they're still doing the thing that we all mostly know the AIs don't do that great, is originate a new idea, which we could debate about how creative AIs are all day long, but there's still a really good thing that a writer does, which is create a world, create a thing. And, it's pretty superpowered, I think.
Fred, what would you say? Or Minh, I'm so sorry, Minh, what would you say?
It's okay, we're the same person.
There's too many Freds here.
There's 3 Freds here. Me, Fred 3, Fred Grinstein, Fred 2, and Fred Graver, Fred 1. I agree with what Fred Grinstein is saying. I think, and I what you were saying, Fred Graver, which is, that I do think that AI, at least I don't know if you articulated quite like this, but I do feel that AI exposes holes in organizations just by being so good at what a lot of people think they are good at. And I think that's interesting, because I think a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of organizations in general suffer from glut or gatekeeping or whatever it is. And because of how AI works, I think it is exposing that a bit, which makes me wonder what do a lot of these, 100-plus-year-old or 30-plus-year-old structures, that human structures, corporations that we built over a long time, how do they survive, or how do they change in this world? Mm-hmm. And we're probably in year 1 of 20 of seeing that transformation. I think it's going to take a long time, and that leads me to what I'm seeing in the tech world. I come from tech, so it's going to be a nice marriage of me and Fred Grinstein of he comes from the TV, documentary, reality TV world, and I've come from tech for the last 20, 30 years. And so what do we see differently? And it's been interesting to watch the tech world where, now you increasingly see product managers not necessarily even write what we call PRD, right? A product requirements document, where they don't do that anymore. They're just going straight to vibe coding, right? They're vibe coding a vision of their product. It's not usable. You can click around it, you can use, but previously, I would say 5 to 10 years ago, even 2 years ago, you could say people were having to, literally draw out their designs.
Right, you'd go to Figma and you'd create a clickable Figma and right.
I would draw with pen and paper, by the way. I'm a product manager. And then
so now you're seeing, hey, product managers, product developers are vibe coding the product and then sending that to the actual developers who can actually build a real product with a database, servers. And of course, that is being muddied. That is becoming gray. And so I look at that and I think to myself, okay, what is the relationship between writers and the directors and producers in that same vein? Is there going to be more and more gradation between what I can do? And even the directors and the producers can even reach into the writers' world a little bit. And so that to me makes, what is that in-between space that AI is now creating between people, which is really interesting. I think a lot of people will knee-jerk to it's going to kill jobs and it's going to destroy creativity. But I think to Fred Grinstein's point, it's like, hey, there is still that provenance or that like sacred place of originality. I think that is still there, but I also think that's changing too. I think there's still that originality, and that gets to be kind of coded with this gradations that I'm referring to. But also, like, do I have to look at a blank page anymore? Like that kind of relationship that when I fell in love with AI is with Midjourney, just because it was just so fast. I got weird, stupid, hallucinatory stuff, and I could tune it in all these weird ways. And yet I could just be like, rabbit, right? And then it would give me all sorts of weird things. And I'd be like, oh, maybe my rabbit is running down into this hole, and that hole is actually a portal, and and I could just follow my nose on the visuals that are thrown back at me. So I wonder, for writers, is that relationship to their creation also changing because they are getting to have, this recursive feedback of AI hallucination or whatever, or being able to see their creations in real life faster, right? So I wonder what that is going to do.
Yeah. I think what I've talked with writers about it, you fall into two camps. This is intrusive. Like, I don't want to know I know what my character looks like in my head. I don't need to see it yet. And then other people are just kind of like, I want to know what other people are seeing based on my description. Right. So,
right.
And particularly then, if you then drop it into VO3 and you say, or whatever, and say, create a video of this character doing this, right? Suddenly you're kind of like, you're thrown into another dimension in the broad run. And I know you have a question, but I'm going to make a huge jump here. The thinking becomes higher level thinking because AI takes care of a lot of the grunt work, right? So if instead of having a meeting, let's say you're working with people on creating a film or TV show, instead of having that meeting where everybody's sitting there thinking about who would we cast for this, right? Or what does this character look like? And you realize it's all the blind man and the elephant. People have 6 different ideas for what the character is. The writer, or maybe the writer and the director together, come in and go, this is the character we created, using image generation. Let's find somebody like that.
I had a comment to both of you, but Yoav is more patiently raising his hand, and I want to respect patient people.
Respect and patience. This is really different than the online community in many ways. Awesome. I could have a follow-up question about that. I totally agree with your assessment, Fred, too, that I think that if in 5 years we will see that writers are the big winners from this technology. That's what I personally believe. But I don't see writers embracing it as much as I would have liked to. And what I'm interested in hearing is from your experience, especially in the GenJams, how many writers do you see? And if you see those writers, what do they say? Do they feel the same way as you do? And if you don't see writers, why do you think that's the case? If for us it's so obvious that these are the big winners.
It's funny. I almost, it's a good note to us men. We should be doing more intake forums on who qualifies in all these different roles on traditional sets. I guess I'm in general starting to see a pattern that I think the multi-hyphenate approach has probably been happening anyway in places like Hollywood, that a lot of people, I come from unscripted and reality TV, where anybody who's been in the space knows that we created a long time ago the portmanteau of predator or shredder, of people that shooters, producers, editors. Like, people have been taking on multiple hats for a while. So I don't know how many. I don't relate perhaps to enough people that only identify as I only write. Maybe that's Fred Grader's world. But I guess, like, to sort of react to the broader conversation here, there's 2 things that are coming up for me. There's like the emotional journey that all of this really has, and that's why there are spirited debates or death threats or all kinds of insane things that happens between people talking to each other. And I think that's what is underlying somebody's sense of security, or because they're not feeling safe. They're not feeling like this is right, or there's all these emotional reactions. And I also think that all connects to some question of fundamental value, because, like, in some ways, a lot of that sense of needing safety or security is because somebody's like, will this affect my money? Will this affect the way that I've decided to design my career, and the fact that there's this thing called intellectual property and copyrights that protect my ability to come up with something? So I think as you start to break things down of what is the value of any of these propositions, and if we still consider technology as somehow just a tool, I don't think it's just a tool, but let's call it just a tool for now. It goes back to what I was saying, is that it's a choice you get to make now, and if you see your role as a writer as fundamentally just creating IP and something that has an initial value for somebody else to go make it into a TV show, then start worrying about which model you're working with and whether or not it trains on your data. Then start making tactical choices of how that worry translates into the effect of it, because you can still use it. Just go and check that off and make sure that that's not a worry for you. If you're a writer that perhaps has sat there looking at 20 scripts that never went anywhere, because you're like most writers in Hollywood who aren't just instant successes just because they started typing something, you might start to wonder, wait, what if I advanced my cause by having a sizzle tape, by having a brought to life iteration of what I'm thinking over here by myself in my dreams? Okay. Those are two different types of values. And I mean value in terms of how can I advance my effort? And that's still inside the machinery of this thing called Hollywood that makes movies and TV shows. I think if you start to then go down to the value of creative potential, and Fred Graver and I have talked about this, I frankly get almost extra excited about people that have been writing asymmetrically, people that have been writing outside of the hard and fast 2-hour movie format, because that is just one commodity of writing. In the last 100 years, people have been writing in all kinds of ways. We've just found this one commercial output called movies and TV shows that is valuable. Okay. But what AI is starting to let us do is we're starting to play with different ways of crunching creative data and thinking about different expressions of that. The fact that YouTube has created an infinitely variable way to present your stories and information, that marriage of possibility, and maybe me and my asymmetrical novel that jumps through space and time and has 7 acts in it instead of 3, that to me is so infinitely potentially valuable. So again, manage the emotions of what are you really worried about here? If you're worried about your sense of safety and your job, then okay, then start to make tactical choices of the tool you're using. But then think about what is the value that you're really chasing here? Is it just to be creative? Is it to get my stuff in front of people? Is it to protect its IP? Then start to manage that about which choice you're making and why. And I really think that's less binary, less pure raw emotion. It's actually starting to be like the way we make other choices in life, which is, productive.
That was a phenomenal reply. That was great. Yeah, there's a lot to think about in that, and particularly for people who are, thinking about, their career as a writer. And I think, Fred, what you're pointing out, there are other forms that you're going to be able to write for. There are other ways to look at this. AI can help you realize what those other forms are and can help you think through them. We are watching the and you read people like Doug Shapiro, but we're watching these huge shifts, and I'm avoiding using the word crumbling and things like that. You're just watching this huge restructuring of what entertainment means, what it means to the consumer a lot. And the consumer drives everything, right? So, the fact that people are spending more of their time looking at Sora 2 now, there's four more minutes of the day gone that you can't grab if you're a TV producer, and you're going to start discovering these things, and you're going to, you embrace them. And so I want to bring this down a little bit, a few levels. I know you guys can't, you don't like to, or don't want to, I'm not asking you to, recommend specific tools, but if you're in our subreddit and you're like, okay, great, Fred 2 and Minh, you guys are working with thousands of people in these GenJams. Help me out. What are some easy things that I could start playing with now that could give me a sense of what's possible?
Minh, I feel like you've been Swiss Army knifing.
Your mind. You should use your mind and your heart.
Yes, we've done that. we've done that.
Yeah, you've done that work. Okay.
Yeah.
Use the stories within
I couldn't
your
agree
life.
with you more. And I have this debate all the time with people that the first step is turn off AI and write something, right? Then it's useful.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay, so I've written, let's say I have a 30-page outline for a story. And maybe it'll be a novel, and maybe it'll be a screenplay, maybe something. And I love this idea that I could bring it to life using generative AI. And I'm your friend, and I call you up and I say, hey, what are some ways that I could play around with this and experiment with it? What would you tell me to do?
I mean, I think it depends on, the person. And I definitely think like some tools are more like there's agentic tools, right? Like Sora or Popcorn or Hypernatural or these tools that and OpenArt that allow you to essentially create a trailer very rapidly, right? Which might be what you want. You might have written an entire script or a trailer or whatever, and you just want to see what it could feel like so that you can go back and that's one thing. Then there's the suite of aggregators like Korea, FreePik, also OpenArt in there, and also, a bunch of them, right? And those are the aggregators, which are tools that allow you to have a lot of different tools within one tool, right? Or you might want to get really deep into one specific model like Flow, Google's Flow, or Kling, or Hailuo, Max Hailuo, or Luma, or any of these tools, and you just want to use just one model and just be focused on that. But these aggregators and these models, as opposed to these agentic tools, then you kind of have to have a little bit of technique. You kind of have to have a particular storyboard or vision that you want to go with from there, and then you want to execute that. So I think it depends on what your needs are, and how granular you want to be. I think that is obviously going to change. I think we're going to get more granular over time, and these agentic tools are also going to get better over time. But yeah, if you just want to visualize something, that's one. If you just want to, or if you want to go deeper and have a very particular vision, you want your character to be standing in a certain place, you might have to start learning actual technique of how to use these AI tools, or you're hybriding, VFX compositing with AI stuff. So I think that's kind of the milieu right now of what's possible. But, for me, like, honestly, I've spent so much time on Midjourney, and that's just been my home for a lot of stuff. And then that's a jumping off point when I feel like, Midjourney is not enough. It's not getting the physics right or the action, that I'm bringing it into other tools. But just because I like to do the storyboarding, right? I love to imagine shots and use Midjourney to get to the shots that I want. Then I go back to the writing. I don't like, how this character is kind of coming out for me in visually. I go back to my writing. So like, I don't know. And I will say that I do think generally that people tend to arrive in the workflow that fits their personality and the tools that fit their personality and their needs. I think that's generally the advice that I would give. Like, play with one set of tools. Don't give up. Sometimes I've generated 1,000 images before I got to the one that I liked. And so like, play until you get to what you like. And in that playing, you find yourself having some familiarity with the tools that work for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think I agree with all of that. And I think that's goes back to my feeling that this technology isn't settled yet. And there's two observations there. One is, put yourself in a position to start seeing it incoming and start recognizing where it might work for you. And start finding one utility to at least be familiar with it. And then that'll start to inform the language you're speaking that. But I think more bullishly, and I feel this deeply, you're still reacting to the results of the early adopters when people see what's on their social feeds, when people see what's being discussed in like the Hollywood Reporter about the impact of AI and creativity. It's not yet and this is what everybody who's really creative is doing with it. And I think so I say that meaning that I think there's so much more discovery of what any of the people in this subreddit who are really creative people who've been making ideas with their words for a long time. What do they discover is the utility of this technology? How did they, and to go back to something Minh was saying before, the vibe coding layer, like we're actually also getting access to being creative people who can suddenly create software. So some of the most interesting creative people I know are people that used to call themselves a writer or someone that did these very clear tasks on a movie set, but they're now discovering that there are these new things that they do really well that actually either have leveled up their entrepreneur status of what they can start companies on or how they can run their businesses better, or just do what they do better. Like you may create a software that helps you write your script better because it's designed to do what you need because you're creating it. So there's like, allow yourself to not know the answer and start playing, and then also realize that some of its best answers are because people in the subreddit are going to start using it. But to reiterate what Minh was saying, then I look at history. Like I was old enough to be in an edit room where people were still splicing film on like Hollywood film sets. And I saw like nonlinear editing completely change the way. And that was a moment of friction too. It was a lot of people that were feeling weird about what was happening. And that was even before digital replaced film altogether. But think about how much making a movie has changed now that we do it non-linearly. And I think if you now have the ability to interact with your idea differently, whether it's a blank page that you get to interact with differently, or we've been talking a lot about how these agentic tools, specifically Sora 2, the way that this cameo feature allows you to start quickly role playing. Like there's this new take on improv, and if some people might even say that they like bringing improv actors into their writer's room to sort of play with their ideas. It's the same thing. We were talking to one, and to be in our community on these Gen Talks, but we had this guy from Germany, is a creator called Adrian. He was telling us how, again, a creator who's stuck on the advancement of their idea. And at that point, he had at least advanced to having the table read of his script. And he had like the raw footage of actors that he was able to spend a little bit of money to get around to read his script. And he's like, wait a second, now I can use their voices to lip sync animated characters to create my reel off of that table read. Like that's not on the user's manual. That's not on like the Sam Altman pitch of what does my tool do? Like that is people saying, how does this fit a need I have? And at that moment, he's like, look, I raised up enough money to get a table read, but I can't advance my project. Now I'm able to take that script, that creativity, that effort that I put into it to advance it to being something that minimally lets him see his film better. And that's why I'm trying to empower people to like, don't just stop where you're stuck. Start letting yourself drive that car and see where it takes you.
I have a few things to this was great. This was incredible. I have a few responses. One, Fred, to your point about not knowing, right? So I have here's how I've been doing this. And I am an older writer, just kind of plodding through this stuff. I very often will literally just go to Google and say, I am trying to do this, right? What's the best thing what's the best software I can use right now to imagine what my characters look like? Or once I have these characters, what's the best software I can use and easiest so I could put them into some kind of video, right? You can Google it, right? It's just, I know that sounds really basic, but you can Google it, and Google works better than ChatGPT and Claude in that because it's up to date and it gives you the latest stuff. But then you can go to ChatGPT, and I advise writers to do this all the time. I am trying to do X with this software. Can you give me step-by-step instructions? And I'm a dumb writer. I say that about myself. And give me step-by-step instructions so I could use Google Flow to do this, or I could use it, whatever. And then to your other point, there are people who are very good at this stuff who are publishing things on YouTube or on their on Substack or whatever, and they are breaking this stuff down step by step by step. And that's all. So that journey of just like, go ahead, just Google it, fumfer around trying to find it, ask ChatGPT how to use that tool, and then look for people who use that tool really well, because a lot of them are uploading the instructions. And then to both of your point, the distance between drinking your first beer and deciding you want to learn more about wine is very short in the world of AI. You start using Sora 2, or you start using something like Popcorn, and you go, okay, I really want to do this right. And then you're just hooked. It's the gateway drug.
I mean, and maybe we gave you too high level answers, but like literally yesterday, I'm with a student from Chapman University who I'm stressing out about. I need you to finish your final film. I need you to get working on it. And he's very much in writer's block mode. He's literally like, I don't know, I'm having trouble storyboarding this. And we just jumped on to Gemini, could have been ChatGPT. And again, I encourage people to find their safe space of what does it feel like when you insert your prized idea into an LLM and do the research and I think there's pretty well documented ways to have it not train on your data or not have the memory turned on. But let's say you've gotten to that place where you trust it and you feel safe. I even told him stop typing, like learn how to use the dictation tool. Like get to the point that I'm talking to someone like Fred Graver or Yoav or Minh, that I'm just in that place that I just want to talk about my idea. I don't have it worked out. And we just went through like literally in 5 minutes, how does it just start organizing your thoughts for you? How does it just start? And you can hate on them. You don't even have to like those thoughts, but it's starting to do that thing that would have taken you an hour to at least have something to look at and say, crumble up that piece of paper, throw it away. So I think that is just the initial slipstream. My shortest answer is like, just start learning how immensely powerful all these LLMs are. And even like, and I think Minh will attest, like get to the point they're using kind of all of them. It's not that expensive to try $20 here, $20 there. LLM, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, just try them out.
The other day, Claude asked me, why was I typing in caps? Was I angry? And by the way, I was. It was not giving me what I wanted, and I was typing in caps. You haven't read the project knowledge. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that. Please leave your comments below and subscribe now to learn when we release the rest of our conversation with Fred Grinstein and Minh, where we're going to talk about the future of AI filmmaking and the future of writers within that new world. Until next time, from Yoav and myself, keep writing.